Hello everyone, here I am ready to share what else I saw in October that I didn't already tell you about. Not a ton of movies to cover this time, which from an editing perspective is a relief. I did do 4 solo reviews last month, all of them scary movies in some shape or form. I didn't get a chance to watch some of the movies I had hoped to see, but that's okay. I'll just watch them this month, or the next, or sometime down the road. It doesn't really matter. I don't feel like, man, it's 11:59 on October 31st, and I didn't get to watch these 7 movies that I'd intended to see. I'll just have to wait until October 1st next year. No, it's not like that. They just carry over. There's so much carrying over that happens on this channel, you have no idea. But it's okay, it's fine. Anyway, movie number 1 is 2020's Archive. This one was a viewer recommendation I already had on my watch list. It's a futuristic sci-fi thriller in which Theo James works at a secluded station developing an advanced AI that, well, it's gonna hold somebody's consciousness. I don't know that I should say more than that, because it might be a spoiler. This one's a pastiche of many things. Its content and imagery echo several classic sci-fi films, but if you have an affinity for eerie artificial intelligence stories, this ticks a lot of boxes. The characterization of the AI at different stages of maturity and emotional development was especially good. The lead actress's performance was intriguing, and her makeup was flawless. Theo James was okay too. It's not his fault that every time I see him, my reaction is, ugh, Theo James. I don't have anything against him personally, so I don't know why that is, except I don't like his face. I'm sorry, that's a terrible thing to say. The way the story unfolds causes you to question what's going on and whether a character has good intentions or not. It builds up to what I think was a twist ending. I say I think because my mom and I were both unsure what exactly that twist was, and when a movie leaves you on a shaky note like that, it's a dissatisfying feeling. The movie was alright. It had some compelling moments and some good imagery. I liked its themes, the sentiment it builds on. It was on the slow side, though, with a lot of shots or scenes reused to mark transitions and show time passing. That repetition made it feel like the movie was being padded and stretched out, when it didn't need to be. Movie number 2 was a rewatch, I think. I'm pretty sure I had seen the entire movie before. 1953's It Came from Outer Space. Richard Carlson plays an aspiring astronomer who, with his schoolteacher girlfriend, Barbara Rush, witnesses a UFO crash. When they go to check it out, he finds evidence of extraterrestrials around the site. But, of course, nobody believes him. This is one of director Jack Arnold's sci-fi horror classics, along with The Incredible Shrinking Man, Tarantula, and my personal favorite, Creature from the Black Lagoon, which also stars Richard Carlson. It was made in 3D at the height of that craze in the 50s, which explains why some of the visuals are lunging at the screen. A highlight is its clever introduction of alien vision. The early sequence where the audience finds out life in the UFO has survived the crash is great, very spooky, and then what I believe is trick photography is employed to represent the alien's point of view. As far as I know, nothing quite like that had ever been done before. This one's never been a favorite of mine, though. No particular reason, there isn't anything that I dislike about it. It just doesn't endear itself to me or hold my interest like other films of its ilk do. Both times I've seen it, I've had trouble paying attention, and that's not generally something I struggle with. It's definitely a must-see if you like old alien movies, though, and even if I don't especially love it myself, I agree that it's worthy to be held in high esteem by those in the classic sci-fi community. Movie number 3 is not a scary movie or a science fiction movie. It's 1949's The Big Steal, in which Robert Mitchum and Jane Greer reunite on screen 5-ish years after their first zesty teaming in Out of the Past. In this film, they go running and driving around Mexico in pursuit of stolen money, while someone else pursues them. Mitchum is looking to clear his name, and Greer just wants her money back, unaware that the stakes are much higher than she's thinking. This was a fun movie. I would say the pairing of Mitchum and Greer is the main draw for classic Hollywood fans. The chemistry they had before is still there, but the content is much lighter. Their characters are refreshing, and though it's not a comedy, they generate some laughs with their spicy dialogue and humorous reactions to quirky things that happen along the way. The movie also has some good chases, including one on a road with hairpin turns where Greer takes the wheel and Mitchum nervously eyes the steep drop-offs that fly past. To Catch a Thief, anyone? Patrick Knowles co-stars as a grade A heel, William Bendix plays a variation of the type he usually played, and Ramon Navarro adds his support as a charming, suspicious policeman with a good poker face. Movie number 4 is 1955's Creature with the Atom Brain, a revenge tale where someone is reanimating dead men and sending them to kill his enemies. The bewildering evidence threatens to sink the investigation, but thank goodness Richard Denning is here to roll up his sleeves and put the pieces together. Actually, he only rolls his sleeves up once in this movie. It's very brief and not past the elbow, so I was rather disappointed. I see Richard Denning and I just naturally assume that at some point those sleeves are gonna get rolled up and he's gonna, nice, at least forearm exposure, possibly some bicep. It just happens in so many of his movies that I expect it. And then it happened here and I was like, oh yeah, here we go. and then he had to go back to work and he rolled them back down and I was like, hey! What is this? You can't do that. I can't use this. As far as the solving of the crime goes, there's some inconsistency. Sometimes things are figured out way too easily. Other times characters are slow on the uptake, missing something that should be obvious just so the movie can milk the tension. But this was something different, and we had fun with it. It's got an awesome opening shot, a man emerging out of the darkness and marching down the street toward the camera in time with the heartbeat of the music. This visual was fantastic. Might have set the bar too high for the rest of the movie, which doesn't ever reach that level of aesthetic appeal again, but for the most part, this was something I hadn't really seen before, and it was entertaining, and Richard Denning was a likable lead, as he almost always is when he's not playing the other man. Movie number 5 is 2022's 13 Lives. Not a horror movie, but it does tell the scary true story of a situation that happened in 2018 when a boys' soccer team in Thailand ventured into a cave and became trapped there for days when heavy rains came and flooded the cave. The film, which stars Viggo Mortensen, Colin Farrell, and Joel Edgerton and was directed by Ron Howard, focuses mainly on the rescue efforts and the countless risks taken by the divers who went in, first to find the boys and then to try to get them out alive. I remember when this incident happened, but at least the way the movie depicts it, the whole thing was much more intense than I ever realized. It makes a difference to see just how cramped and how dark certain areas in the cave were, and the dangers the men had to face going in there. There were moments I found extremely stressful because it was a combination of things that terrify me. Complete darkness, being underwater, confined space. We tried to see some horror movies this month, but in all seriousness, I think this was the scariest thing I watched. It's a great story about survival, fortitude, bravery, and ingenuity, and it made for a great movie. A great, tense movie. Movie number 6 is 1974's The Beast Must Die, a werewolf movie by way of And Then There Were None and The Most Dangerous Game, where a group of people with sketchy pasts come for a weekend in the country, unaware their hunter-host, Calvin Lockhart, believes one of them is a werewolf. I loved the gimmicky beginning, in which the narrator introduces the murder mystery premise and informs the viewer that there will be a werewolf break later on where you get to guess who done it. But I didn't care much for the film itself. It seemed disjointed and a little sloppy, there weren't enough suspects, and there was some very hammy acting that became distracting. Everybody's odd, and the lead character in particular is strange. I couldn't tell if it was the actor, if the character was supposed to be eccentric, or he was overdoing it on purpose. I also couldn't help laughing at the confrontations with the so-called werewolf. This character is supposed to be a master hunter, but he's a terrible shot. He wastes so many bullets and never hits his target. The wolf just sails over him or past him every time, and it was kind of ludicrous. Veterans Peter Cushing and Anton Diffring were nice to see and brought their inherent elegance to this very 70s film, and it was interesting to see such a young Michael Gambon, in a role that definitely is not the one that propelled him to stardom. I don't know, maybe this was too campy for me, or maybe it was just too 70s for my taste. After that auspicious start, I found it a letdown. Movie number 7 is 1939's The Four Feathers, Zoltan Korda's epic interpretation of a novel that's been adapted a few times. Set in the late 19th century, an English officer resigns his commission just before his regiment leaves for battle in the Sudan. When his friends send him 4 white feathers symbolic of cowardice, he vows to prove himself by traveling in their wake. It's a sumptuous-looking film, thanks to the Technicolor, though a lot of the visuals consist of desert, sky, and the Nile. June Dupree plays the disappointed fiancé, C. Aubrey Smith, her father, who bores everyone with the same war story and "back in my day, men were men" speech at every dinner party. John Clements stars, and while he plays the part well and pulls off an impressive transformation, I didn't find the lead character particularly memorable. It's Ralph Richardson who owns this film, as a former romantic rival who suffers sunstroke and is stricken with blindness. Richardson handles the role beautifully. You feel for the character as pride and a desire to do his duty make him conceal his vulnerability until it's no longer possible. All the best scenes, in my opinion, revolve around him, and he gets one of those nonverbal moments of realization I like so much. The narrative is an examination of courage and conviction leading to noble acts. One person sacrifices something for someone else, who makes a sacrifice for another person, and so on. Today's audiences may be so intent on condemning the colonialism that they can't spare any sympathy for the characters, but I found several moments in the film quite moving. Movie number 8 is 1997's Air Force One, in which Harrison Ford's President of the United States is faced with a tough situation when Russian communist terrorists hijack Air Force One and threaten to kill hostages until they get what they want. At just over 2 hours, it seems a touch long, but if you're gonna have a plane disaster set on Air Force One, there's a lot you'll want to cram in there, so I understand. It was directed by Wolfgang Peterson, and there are lots of familiar faces in the cast. Glenn Close as the VP, Dean Stockwell as Secretary of Defense, William H. Macy, Xander Berkeley. Co-star Gary Oldman does his thing as the villain. He's always worth watching. And Harrison Ford's president is the kind of leader you can get behind. Quick thinking, problem-solving, selfless, commanding respect, strong and able in both body and mind. The movie's got some unadulterated 90s cheese, with glorious explosions, corny upswings in Jerry Goldsmith's score whenever the good guys catch a break, and a famous one-liner, "Get off my plane." That's my best Harrison Ford impression. But all things considered, it's the kind of movie that makes a lot of people think, those were the good old days. Movie number 9 is 1988's The Vanishing, or Spoorloos as it's known in the original Dutch. While traveling through France on vacation, a man and his girlfriend stop at a gas station where she disappears. Years later, he's still haunted by guilt and unanswered questions, while the man responsible keeps watch from a distance. This is a very intriguing psychological thriller, and it turned out to be a good fit for spooky season because the scariest stories are often the ones that are the most realistic, and this one certainly is. The Vanishing is tense and unsettling in a subtle, methodical way. Its complexity springs from a focus divided between the boyfriend obsessed with the truth and the abductor obsessed with his crime. This was directed by George Slicer, who incidentally also made the poorly received by most 1993 American remake. And it has some great photography. One shot mimics the point of view over a pair of glasses with the couple appearing in the top portion of the frame, and that's followed by a close-up of those glasses with the woman's face reflected in both lenses. The camera movement also does a fine job leading the viewer on and directing our attention toward certain things, and I loved how little details ended up fitting together, as if everything shown or mentioned became part of a puzzle. The deeper the story goes, the more engrossing it becomes, and it has two gut punches. One comes when you realize just how everything came about, and the other comes at the very end. Unfortunately, it was kind of spoiled for me. I heard someone talking about how the remake ends, but the original climax is different, much darker. So thankfully, I wasn't totally robbed of the surprise. It's an effective, well thought out, quietly disturbing film, and I really liked its construction and presentation. Movie number 10 is a viewer recommendation from years ago, the 1967 Rankin-Bass special Mad Monster Party. Boris Karloff voices Baron von Frankenstein, head of the World Organization of Monsters, who invites them to his island to celebrate a new invention and announce his retirement. But his chosen heir is his clumsy, nerdy pharmacist nephew who's only a human, so the monsters conspire to do away with him. Of course, this production features that unique Rankin-Bass Animagic stop-motion animation, and it was something. It's creative in concept and execution, and I was impressed with how many monsters they squeezed in, though to avoid paying royalties, a lot of them appear under different names. The Wolfman is the werewolf, King Kong is simply called It, and I guess one of them was just a Peter Lorre monster. I was surprised by some of the sly jokes and more mature elements, like the male monster is lusting after Frankenstein's busty assistant Francesca, voiced by Gail Garnett. Phyllis Diller is the other celebrity voice, playing the monster's mate, also known as the Bride of Frankenstein, a tongue-in-cheek caricature of Diller herself. I'm not a huge fan of the Rankin-Bass holiday specials, and admittedly, if this hadn't been requested by several people, I probably wouldn't have chosen to watch it on my own, but it was an interesting novelty, a quirky, groovy film with a number of song and dance breaks, and as is always the case, it's a pleasure to hear Boris Karloff's voice. Movie number 11 is 1946's The Chase, a crime thriller in which Robert Cummings plays a broke guy who finds a wallet full of cash and returns it to its owner. Impressed with his honesty, the man hires him as a chauffeur, but too late Cummings finds out his rich new boss is kind of a psychopath. For some reason I had low expectations for this one, but it was better than I anticipated, with some startling twists. I did get a little lost at one point. That's totally my fault. I kept nodding off for a few minutes, and that was unfortunate because things took a psychological turn and the twists kept coming, which is not something you want to sleep through. I wasn't falling asleep because the movie was boring. It was the same thing it always is. I got cold, so then I started, sitting like that or whatever, and then I started to warm up, and it was nice and cozy, and I just started drifting away. It was a decent film, though. Michelle Morgan plays the married woman in distress. Steve Cochran is rather creepy as the sadistic, manipulative antagonist. And Peter Lorre, great as always, plays his apathetic sidekick. And movie number 12 is The Maze, another 3D adventure from 1953 that stars Richard Carlson. What are the chances that I would talk about both It Came from Outer Space and The Maze in the same video? I didn't plan this, it just happened that way. While reading about something else, I came across a mention of this film and it stoked my interest. Lo and behold, I found it on YouTube in good quality, and I thought it was great. Richard Carlson, heir to his uncle's remote Scottish estate, responds to a mysterious summons just before his wedding. After weeks of silence, his fiancée receives a letter ending their engagement. Instead of getting upset, she and her reluctant aunt travel to the castle to get answers and find him greatly changed in manner and appearance. This film was directed by William Cameron Menzies, and I thought it was lots of fun. It's got splendid atmosphere, crisp photography, appealing use of light and shadows. The set design in the castle is cool, including a staircase with unusually wide steps, huge doors, a cobwebby secret tower. The spooky maze sequence is great, and then the reveal... I don't know what to say about the reveal. I'm not going to give it away, of course. There was some unintentional humor, and I couldn't help laughing, but even then, it was shocking because the idea is so weird and unexpected. Richard Carlson delivers a fine performance, pulling off the about-face from nice young man to stern, standoffish lord of the manor, and he deserved an Oscar for delivering his lines near the end with a straight face. There are definitely a couple wacky moments, and for some people, the reveal might ruin the whole movie, which up to that point was building serious tension, but I didn't mind. The only detractor is the 3D. Maybe if I watched it with 3D glasses on, I'd think differently, but I felt the gimmick added nothing to the film and instead made for some bizarrely staged shots. Other than that, though, I put this down as a winner. And that's everything! I hope you enjoyed this collection of reviews. Please let me know your thoughts on any of these films that you may have seen in the comments below, and I'll be back soon. Thanks for watching!